I'll start with Randy's early childhood. When he first started to play the guitar, he was just about 6 and a half. He found an old acoustic guitar in the house that belonged to my father, and he picked it up and he never put it down again for the rest of his short life. He just loved the guitar. So, fortunately, because I have a music school, I suggested he start lessons, which he wanted to, of course. And my daughter also started right at the same time. They were just about 7 and 8 and a half at that time. My daughter was about a year and a half older than Randy. So they started taking lessons. In those days, way back then, they called it folk guitar, where the student would learn a few chords and then learn to play a pop tune that was current for the day, and then go on to another one and learn another few chords. Well, that didn't last too long with Randy. He wanted more than that. So he came and said, Mom, I really want to take electric guitar. So I said, well, okay. Fortunately, I had a very good electric guitar teacher at that time. So Randy started electric guitar lessons. Well, that went along just very nicely for about a year, maybe even a little less than a year. And the teacher, Scott Shelley, came to me and said, well, I've taught him everything I can teach him. I don't know anything more to teach him. And I said, oh, come on, Scott. I thought he was just teasing me. And I said, that just couldn't be. And he said, no, he said, I'm serious. I really mean that. And I said, well, if you really mean that, then we'll just stop. Well, Randy took it on his own from that time on, as far as electric guitar is concerned. He just played and figured out things, sort of made his own style, shall we say, because we didn't have a lot of recording equipment in those days. But as a matter of fact, we had none. And he said he wasn't influenced by hardly anybody because he didn't have the records to listen to, which was a good thing because he always stressed that for the rest of his playing days. Be yourself, make your own style, and don't copy somebody else. So that was an important point. After he went along on his own for a while, he had a close friend in school and also a neighborhood friend of ours. Kelly Garney lived just a few blocks from us. And Randy said, Kelly, I want somebody to jam with. So I'm going to teach you how to play bass guitar. Then we can jam together. Well, okay, Kelly was most cooperative with anything Randy said. And so Randy taught Kelly how to play bass guitar. Well, they would jam after school. They were in junior high school at this time. And they would jam together after school. And of course, then the neighbors got very unhappy and said it was too loud. And I said, well, please, Randy, why don't you just turn down so that they don't get upset? And he turned down for a short period, but somehow that volume always started to come back up again. So Kelly and Randy decided to ask a drummer friend to come in and jam with them sometimes. And of course, I guess they practiced in the garage most of those days. So it was hard to keep a drummer, so they went through all kinds of friends who played drums. But they got a little something going as far as a group, and they were asked to play for parties, and they just loved to play. So they would play, and then they would be recommended to play for another party, and they played on the mall in Burbank. They played in the park in Burbank, and they were just playing quite a bit, really. So, since they seemed to be doing so well, Randy and Kelly said, well, we should get a singer. So they did. That, uh, that was when Quiet Riot started because they interviewed Kevin DeBro, and I can remember the day he came to the house. And I could hear Kevin say, well, all right, if you don't like me, just tell me, I'll go home. Well, they said, no, just wait, let's just talk a little bit. So they finally got it together, and they also got their drummer, who was Drew Forsyth, and they started Quiet Riot at that time, all together. And Randy and Kelly Garney were the instigators of that. So they played locally, branched out a little bit more. I think they played at the American Legion Hall and so on and so on. And the fans all would get so excited. And they said, well, let's call it Quiet Riot because that's the way it seemed a little bit in that direction. So then in Quiet Riot days, they started to play the clubs in LA. They played all the clubs many, many times, especially the old Starwood. That was fun days. That was just a lot of fun. I enjoyed going there because it was comfortable. They had a balcony upstairs, so it was a little bit more private. But they did play there many, many times, and it was just lots of fun. I think they had lots of fun too. And I'm sure the audience did. So then when Randy had the opportunity to go with Ozzy, that was quite exciting. Um, Someone had recommended Randy to Ozzy. Ozzy was about ready to give up. He had been looking for a new guitar player for quite some time. And this bass player said you should at least listen to Randy Rhoads before you leave. Well, they called Randy that morning and he said, oh, well, I don't know. I like my band, Quiet Riot. And of course, at that time, he was teaching. By that time, he was about 15, 16, maybe a little more than that. And he had been teaching in my school. Actually, I think he was about 15 or 16 when he started to teach in my school. So this would be a little later. And he had a number of students, actually. He had about 50 students or more. He was a good teacher, too, by the way. Very good teacher. He was very patient. He could relate to the student and know how to pace them properly, which is very important. And then he would always make sure that he played a bit with the students. And the students would come out on cloud nine because they thought they sounded so good. And it was really Randy that was making them sound so good. But it was good for them either way because it was a good teaching procedure. So that made a nice income for Randy. He didn't have to get a day job ever. And that helped him music wise too, because at that time he was practicing a great deal. His usual schedule would be practice about 45 or an hour at home in the morning, come to work at my school in the afternoon, teach until about 10:30 at night. We don't open until in the afternoon, so he probably started about 2:30, 3 o'clock, thereabouts. And playing off and on with the students is one of the greatest ways to build up a lot of flexibility, a lot of stamina, because you play and then you rest, and you're resting the muscles. Then you come back, use them again, rest them, and so on. And that is one of the things that Randy did give credit to a lot of the good parts in his playing: flexibility, speed, and of course, the one above all is the emotion, that the feelings that he put into his playing. But nevertheless, he didn't really need a job, and he liked to be with his band because they played a lot. And they rehearsed 2 or 3 times during the week, and then they'd usually play a gig or two, or maybe even three on the weekend. So that was a lot of playing. And Randy was happy as long as he was playing. And he wasn't choosy or fussy. He was always looking for something more that perhaps he didn't know or wanted to improve on. And he felt he learned by teaching too. And that's true. A teacher does learn when you teach. Surprisingly, how much you do learn. So when Ozzy, or someone, of course, called for Ozzy, but when they did call, Randy said, "Oh, I don't think I'd be interested. I'm pretty comfortable here, and I'm with my band, and I've got my work at my mom's school, and so I don't think so." Well, he hung up, and I said, who was that, Randy? What's that all about? So he explained a little bit to me who Ozzy was. I didn't know, of course. And I said, well, maybe you should just go and meet Ozzy if he's been in the business so long, because actually Ozzy had been in the business a good many years by that time. When I found out how long Ozzy had been in the business, I said, Randy, in the music business, it's sometimes very important to know some important people because they can perhaps help you or recommend you or whatever. So I said it might be worth the trip down into Hollywood just to meet Ozzy, if nothing else. Well, fortunately, they did call back later in the day, and I had persuaded Randy to really think about going down because they wanted Randy to come to the hotel where Ozzy was staying to audition for him. So Randy said, well, he said, I work late at my mom's. I wouldn't be able to get down there until probably after midnight or later. And they said, that's all right. It doesn't matter how late, just come. So Randy did. We finished up here at my school and went on home. And he freshened up a bit and got his little Fender amp that it was his practice amp, just a little one, and went on down to Hollywood where Ozzy was staying. So Randy really wasn't gone very long. And when he came in, I said, well, what happened? And he said, I was just tuning up and warming up a little bit. And Ozzy came out and said, you've got the job. And Randy said, of course, I don't know what the job is. And he said, well, he says, you know how it is in mom and music. You never know. They probably won't call back. But Ozzy did say he would call in 2 weeks. He was due to leave the next day. He had his ticket to return to England. But he did promise that he would call Randy in 2 weeks. So Randy didn't pay too much attention. He said, well, maybe he'll call, maybe not. But exactly in 2 weeks, Ozzy did call. And that was very exciting because that meant that maybe there was going to be some exciting things happen here. Well, it took a few weeks before Randy left for England, but that was a very exciting time. Of course, he had to get his passport first, and they told him to please get some warm clothes. Well, we picked up the warmest clothes in California that we could, but when Randy got over to England, he called and said, well, he said, I guess the clothes in California don't match what they need in England because it wasn't warm enough, so we had to get new clothes over here because the clothes are really built or made to stand this cold weather over here. It was in the fall. I guess it was late October, November when this happened. So it was probably pretty cold in England by that time. But it was exciting. Randy was very excited. It was just such a new experience. And Every time that he called, I could tell that he was just on cloud nine. Well, this all happened extremely fast. It was so fast. Randy always said that things are just happening so fast. I can't hardly get my thoughts together because Ozzy and Randy practically made the first album together in Ozzy's home before they even had a band. And after the first album was pretty much on its way, then they got the band together and started to rehearse. So they had plenty of time on the first album, and I think that's one reason that made it very, very good. So the days went fast. There were the recordings, the of course rehearsals first, then the recordings, and then the touring. And it just happened that the summer before they started their first tour, I was fortunate enough to go over to England for a vacation to visit Randy and also to hear the band. And it was very exciting for me. There's kind of a special little uh, meeting that I had first with Ozzy. I'll explain that. I have told that before, and I know Ozzy tells it sometimes too. I didn't know Ozzy at all. I had never met him. So when I arrived in England, they were going to get ready to rehearse in a certain studio, and Randy and I and another person were sitting out in the reception room there, and I thought we were waiting for Ozzy. Of course, I was very ignorant about the situation, and Ozzy was sitting right next to me. So when I said, Randy, when is Ozzy coming? Randy said, Ozzy's right there. So that was a bit of a strange situation, but Ozzy was a very good sport about it. And he tells the story sometimes too. I know that there were many special times that Randy enjoyed, some more than others. He was always happy as long as he could be playing. When he wasn't playing and they had some days off, he did get a bit homesick. And he would call and say, well, I just wish we were playing all the time. Well, of course, they couldn't play all the time. They had to travel and they had to have some time off. But Randy just loved to play. He was always open to learn things. He never felt that it was all right there just because he had been quite successful and reached this point with Ozzy. No, he was always reaching. And just shortly before he went with Ozzy, he started classical guitar. And he had taken a few lessons from someone in I believe it was in La Cañada, which is not far from our neck of the woods, so to speak. And when he was in England, he furthered this pursuit. And he studied with one of the professors from the London University. And that was a very, very plus time for Randy. He enjoyed those lessons extremely. And he became really involved in classical guitar, wanting to further that field. He even had talked with me, and he had talked with Ozzy and Sharon too, and said that he would like to go back and get his degree, university degree, and then get his master degree in classical guitar, which he hoped to complete in Europe because he felt the teachers were very, very superior in that area. So he was working very, very hard in this direction. Well, Randy was so interested in the classical guitar field that while he was on tour towards the end of his short life, he was sitting up after the concerts. He would sit up in the hotel room and pursue writing these very small little notes transcribing all the keys into the modes. And that was part of this field to know more and more about music as far as theory, harmony, and so forth, where you really go in depth and it's quite intensive. So Randy was doing this instead of sleeping. He would sit up and practice the classical guitar and also study the music part that I just described. I know that Rudy Sarzo said many times he would go to sleep listening to Randy practice in the next room. So that worried me a bit at the time because I said, Randy, you really have to get your sleep. You've got to sleep sometime. So that that was Randy. He was intensely interested and he devoted just full time to what he was doing to further himself and pursue other directions. Well, there were many outstanding times that Randy especially felt were very important in the days that he toured with Ozzy. The one that stands out particularly is the show that they gave in San Francisco. It was an outdoor show, and it was the time that they awarded Randy the award for the most outstanding new talent of the year. And he was very, very proud and very thrilled. And he said the concert itself was especially uh, a thrill to him because it was so large, the audience was huge, and the response was just fabulous. The fans have all been so great. I have just received letters and letters and letters, and I still receive letters and phone calls, and I have lots of visitors who come to see me at my school, and they're just all super, super fans. After so many years, this will be the 15th year. They still are very intense fans and so devoted, so sincere. I just thank them all. I wish I could return letters to each and every one of them. It's absolutely impossible for me because I would do nothing but write letters and I still wouldn't be able to cover all of them. But this is a time for me to say thank you to all of you. We meet in the cemetery twice a year for a very personal memorial to Randy that will come up the 19th, real soon, next week, just a few days from now. Many of the fans gather. They come from quite a distance. Sometimes they come from the east, even fly in, perhaps combining the vacation and the anniversary tribute to Randy. They are very, very responsive, and we feel it is very special. There have been many other tributes, all of them very special in their own way. And I just thank everybody for all that they have given concerning Randy.
Well, the first time I ever met Randy Rhoads was I was staying at the La Park Hotel in West Nile, just off Santa Monica, and I just left Sabbath. A guy called down the strum said he'd got his guitar players. I thought he was just, he looked very young, as I recall. But then when I heard him play, I couldn't believe that guys could play so well, you know. I heard him play, and I was just knocked back how remarkable he was. And I don't know. I think I asked him if he wanted to come to England, and he came to England, and he lived with me for a while. I was all messed up at the time because of just getting fired from Savage, and I thought my career was over.
When you first met him, was it like a breath of fresh air?
No. To be honest, when I first met Randy Rhoads, it wasn't such much of a breath of fresh air. I thought it would bide my time because I was in a state of shock after leaving Black Sabbath, and I thought after leaving Black Sabbath, my career was over. So I kind of strung along with him for a while, and not thinking anything would really ever come out of it. But then when he came to England, I got a guitar player, which was a start. And I think I was signed to Jet Records, and then my wife, my now wife, then was my manager. She got involved, and we found Bob Daisley, and we found Lee Kerslake. And he lived with me for a while in my house in Stafford, and we started writing bits and pieces of song. And before so long, we got enough for a couple of albums, you know. And
The first time that, what was the first moment you realised I have a special part in it, not just I have something special?
well, it's been such a long time ago, and it's only after the fact that you realise that you had someone special, because it's like the old saying goes, you never know what you've had until it's gone. In fact, it was only as the years have gone by since Randy's demise, I have reflected on those times, and it seems that we were together for such a long time, but yet such a short time at the same time, you know. It seems that my period of time with Randy Rhoads was longer than my time with Black Sabbath. My period of time after Randy Rhoads wasn't as long as the time I was with Randy Rhoads, because it was such an influential part of my career, and it's in so many ways more than just being a guitar player, as a person, as a human being, as a guy, you know, as a dear friend, and both not only with myself but my wife as well. He was a friend of the family. I mean, of course, we never had the children when he was around, and I often wonder what he would do. Thought about children and things, you know. And it's, well, I've got my daughter's now 13 years of age, and she wasn't born when Randy died, and he's been dead now, I think 15 years this year. And it seems to have gone by like a flash, you know. But there's still parts of the time that I can remember with Randy Rhoads as if it happened yesterday, you know. Things. Like, for instance, he came to me one day and he said, "I want a white Marshall stack." I said, "I don't make one." He said, "Well, I want one." And he was one of these guys that if he wanted something, he would move mountains. He'd drive you mad until he got what he wanted, you know. I said, "Well, Marshall, don't make a white stack." He said, "Well, I want one." I asked him if he can make me one, and I said, "Well, I'll try." And I found him out, and I said, "Look, I'm Ozzy Osbourne. Can you do a white stack?" He said, "I don't care if you're the King of England, we don't." No, I said, "Well, Randy, they don't." He said, "Well, tell him I want one." He said, "Well, once he says, "No, their turn." I said, "Go away, you know." So I went up to Leicester, I think it was, where Marshall was, and I said, you know, or Randy did. I can't really remember whether he was or I went. Anyway, Andy did. He got a white Marshall stack, and if you look on the old photographs, you'll see like a white Marshall stack alongside a regular stack. You know? And he had this pedal board that used to drive us all insane with it. I mean, he was the only one on this planet, him and the guy that made it, that knew how to work it. So when you'd be on the road and you'd be playing an ice rink or something, or near a radio station, you'd get like radios and all these funny noises. And he would get really upset if his sound was altered. And it was really whereas most guitar players use the guitar as an extension of their ego. Randy didn't do that. Randy I think he used his guitar as an extension of his personality.
How would you describe his personality? I mean, obviously, so many people.
Randy Rhoads as a person, as a regular guy, he was a regular guy. You know, he was a caring, loving, funny, goofy, clowning, loving person. He had his moments, so did we all, you know. I mean, he wasn't any different than anybody else, but the fact of the matter is that he was a dedicated musician. I don't know, every day off he'd go in the yellow page and get a classical guitar teacher to come into the hotel room and give him a lesson. I said, "Well, why don't you just have a day off?" We've been burning out bridges at both ends for the last 2.5 years. Just have a day off. He said, "No, I really want, I like this. This is where I get bored having a day off." So he bought himself a classical guitar. And he started to write his own nodes, or I can't remember what they're called, sort of like his own works or whatever. Incidentally, his mother Dolores couldn't decipher them after his death. You know, I mean, he'd written his own thing, and he said to me on that journey, he says, "You know what? He said, I've had enough of this now." I said, "What?" "Yeah, we got Blizzard of Oz and Diary Man and flying up the charts, started doing great business again." And he wants to quit. And I said, "Well, what do you want to quit for?" He said, "I want to go to UCLA and get a degree in classical guitar playing." I said, don't make sense to me. I said, what do you want to do that for? I said, because why don't you make a ton of dough? When you got the money, you can do whatever you like. He said, I'm not interested. And he wasn't that way. He wasn't that kind of a guy. But that's the difference between him and I are. He wasn't interested. Well, not saying I'm in it for the money period. But he didn't look at it as one option of a career. He thought that I'm a guitar player. I don't want to just be known as a rock player. I want to achieve another angle on my instruments and we wanted to get a doctor of philosophy or whatever, a doctorship on classical guitar playing. And he wanted to write classical works more. You listen to, like, for instance, the song Diary of a Madman, the beginning of that, I stole from one of his guitar lessons where he was going through the scales, and I said, you should put an extra note on that and make that into a song. If you like the beginning, dun 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 dun. That was a lesson that he was having when we lived together in an apartment. I was coming around on the couch. I says, that's good, Ronnie. And he says, what? I said, add another note on the end, dun dun. And he went, that's stupid. I said, well, just play it again and just overturn it. I suppose the combination with Bob Daisy, myself, and him was quite interesting for the time that was together. Although Bob never works out because of certain personal problems.
When it comes to me, did you find, or have you found in retrospect, he is someone who? About anyone else that has managed to translate your thoughts?
No, the one thing I will forever be indebted to Randy Rhoads for was the fact that all I was before I met Randy Rhoads was just singing with a rock and roll band who had a lot of ideas. And when I was in Black Sabbath, I had a lot of musical ideas that I couldn't relate because I can't play an instrument. So you feel like a bit of a bozo when you go, well, I've got this really incredible idea which is flying around my head, and they say, well, how does it go? And you start whistling it or humming it or whatever, and they go, well, that's boring. Whereas Randy would say, well, oh yeah, I can know that note. What about if you played it in this note? And he would work with me rather than say, oh, I ain't got time. And then the frustration before I was going, I said, oh, I want to go do a solo album because I was getting with Sabbath. I was getting musically frustrated. Not saying that the Sabbath music was wrong or anything, which I just felt that musically I wanted to do something what I wanted to be more in control of, you know. That was more what I wanted. Not saying I wanted to be the bee's knees. And they turned around and said, well, you're in a band called Black Sabbath. If you've got anything to offer, you should put it to the band. It's all for one and one for all. And I said, well, what about this? And they said, no, we don't like it. What about this? We don't like it. What about this? We don't like it. I goes, well, what if I do a solo album? And then the same old question, if you've got anything to offer, you should put it to the band. So here I was, like a one-legged man in an ass-kicking contest. I wasn't getting nowhere past. So when I met Randy Rhoads, the one thing I will forever be indebted for was the fact that he sat me down and he worked out my ideas with his ideas, and we compromised rather than work against or for each other. But we compromised with each other in every possible way. We made the songs work so that we would all like them, including everybody had a fair say in what they liked and what they didn't like, and the best idea won. You know.
You think with the
I mean, and also, Randy was a guy that if he wasn't, I remember the solo for Diary of a Madman, he was pissed off. He was really angry that he couldn't find one. He says, I'm going in the studio. Don't knock the door. I'll let you know when I'm ready for you. And he spent 3 days and 3 nights in the studio, and he came out and he was like, I think I've got it. Now, when I heard that solo in the studio, I was literally, my ears were pinned back. I'll never forget that.
Do you think? Did you ever look at the moment that he had his? I mean, fate. How much did fate? You told me what he said the night before.
Well, it's a very a lot. I mean, since his death, I've never forgotten his death. Every year I send him flowers and Rachel flowers, you know, because he wasn't the only one to die that day. Sharon's very dear friend Rachel, she worked with Sharon for years, black woman, and since the event, a lot of crazy things. It was all meant to be. It was all not meant to be. It was like a murder and all kinds of. I've thought of weird things. I mean, because you think such a fantastic thing happens, such an incredible thing happens. You think of every which way and scenario possible because you go crazy for a while because you can't accept. I mean, I'm talking to you now. In 1 second, it's amazing. In 1 second, It's amazing in 1 second how your whole life can turn around, you know. I mean, for it's such a wild ride that I mean, it kind of throws you off the planet, you know. And that's kind of what. And so for years after, I was thinking, I wonder why. I mean, I know I'd have been awake. I know I'd have been on the plane. I know. And I was always, why was it? I mean, I remember Randy would say to me, Ozzy, why do you drink so much? Why do you take so much dope? Why do you smoke all the time? He never drank much. He never took drugs at all. He never took a smoked a joint. He smoked cigarettes, but that's about it. He had the occasional drink, but I was drunk and stoned all the time. And he would say to me, you know, Ozzy, you're going to die soon. And when him saying that, and then he goes and dies, and he lives like a relatively clean life compared to me. And me at the age of 48, and he was I think he'd be about late 30s now if he was still alive.
You ever sit? I mean, are these things you sit and wonder what material you would have come out with now, or is it just?
Well, before he died, I distinctly remember we played at Knoxville, Tennessee, and he was just working on this new idea, and it was so revolutionary. But we never recorded any. It was just on the threshold of coming out with this new dimension, which I know for a fact because I go by my feelings. I go by my hairs on my arms, and my hairs on my arms stand up. Like when you got the solo for I don't know, my hairs on my arms stood up. You know, when anybody can do that to me throughout my career, that's a God-given gift. And so when that does that to me, I think I'm like the conductor that can go, yeah, that's good. That makes me feel funny inside. So I'm passing it on, you know. And Randy was doing that every day at sound check, and he was doing that every single day. It wasn't like a guitar solo. It wasn't like a guitar. It was like this new revolutionary idea, which I'm damned if I know what it was about. It was so going so to mess around with it, but more like a sound effects kind of thing. But I don't know. It's hard to explain because I'm not a musician. But I was thinking, God, the next album's going to be so amazing.
How hard was it to do?
Well, after that was the hard. Well, for the first year or so, I was just going on automatic pilot. Sharon and I were both just. I mean, Sharon and I were in shock for a long time, you know. And when people are in shock, you can't really define how people think of shock or like an electric shock or shock of. It's like you have the shock of it happening. And I remember when it happened, and I was there, and I was thinking, is this really happening? You'd know it to say that. It's a lie. You don't think it's happening. You don't think it's not happening. You can't understand what's happening. You just kind of like, you know, like locked in a time lock, and it's like horrible, and you can't get it. Every time you turn around, there's something worse happening, you know, and it's like being in a battlefield, you know.
I mean, it seemed to me.
It's even worse than being in a battlefield, to be honest, because if you go into a battlefield, you know certain people are not going to come out. Whereas if you suddenly wake up and you're in a battlefield, first of all you think, well, how the hell did we get here? And how do you get out, you know? That's the difference. If you walk across a minefield and then your body gets blown up, you expect, oh, well, you know, I don't copy. But if suddenly you go to bed on a bus driving down a freeway, you wake up and you're in the middle of a field and there's a house on fire and there's bits of aeroplane everywhere and people like running around screaming. It's horrendous. It's a reoccurring dream, and it still comes from to me. Now I wake up some nights in a cold sweat with it. You know, I don't never want to be there again. You know.
I was going to say, I mean, it's the amount of years that you've always come up. It seems to come up more.
There's not a day goes by. There's not one day go by that I don't think of him or speak of him. No, I mean, my wife and I look at certain photographs, and there's certain times and there's certain things that we all did, because Sharon and I and Ron used to hang around together like and go get. And there's a lot of things that we did in that short time, you know. I mean, I know he had another band, Quiet Right, but what he ever spoke to me about Quiet Right wasn't very favourable. I know for a fact. He was never happy with his stuff either. He was never happy with. He was always trying to achieve the impossible.
So I mean, some of the things that you used to do.
Yeah, well, I used to like it when he said. I remember just before he died, he'd had a tooth pulled in Phoenix, Arizona, and he was in such a state we had to take him. I cancelled him and take him home. He was in this guy said, "Oh, this won't hurt a while." He came out, and before we got back to the hotel, we must have shoved 4 boxes of Kleenex in his mouth, and he was in a terrible state. Me and his mother took care of him for a while. The hardest thing of all, the real hardest thing of all, for me was to face his parent, to face his mother and his family, because I felt somewhat responsible and guilty of the fact that if I hadn't taken this, I mean, if I look at my son now, my baby Jack, and he was Mrs. Rhoads' baby. If someone was to take my son away from me, some foreigner, and all these crazy things go through your head, you think, it's only when you have children yourself that you can understand. If someone to take your child away and he would never come back, but he'd be in a box. And I mean, I felt really awful for a long time. I had to put on a brave face, and I went kind of crazy. And it was for like 3 or 4 years. I've always maintained the best relationship I can because I've got nothing to hide, and through all of us brazing through it, and the support that we've given each other. Because Mrs. Rhoads is a very wonderful lady in the respect that I don't think I could honestly sit down to you now and say I'd be sane if my son was to go if my son was to die. And if my son was to die in such a horror, if a piece of paper came through my door tomorrow and said my son's got to fight to war, I'd be pissed off. But if he went and he came back and dead, that would be one thing. But if my son went out in a car and he got killed in a plane wreck, and he was with Ozzy Osbourne, I mean, at that time you got to remember that I was like the Antichrist of the planet, But I mean, that's just one angle. I mean, there was a lot of angles that went through my mind. And you go through why him, not me. You go through I'm older than him. Why, and I'm glad it wasn't me. And I'm glad and for a while you feel guilty for being alive. You feel terribly guilty. And I remember that first Christmas Eve. The following year, I just broke down. I couldn't control myself. I was it was an awful time because I thought, what Randy on earth to do? And there's things, the smell. Every time I smell gardenias, because that was Randy's. That's why I always sold saying gardenias to his grave. He loved them. He loved the smell of gardenias. He just loved the smell of gardenias. It would really go crazy if you saw a gardenia and sit there and smell the flower all day. He loved the smell of gardenias.
When you think of some of the funnier and lighter modes,
I remember one time we were in Canada, and this guy was playing classical guitar. We were in a bar as usual, and he said to the guy, he says, "Do you mind if I play classical guitar with you?" And the guy says, "No, by all means." So he goes upstairs, gets his little pig nose on, comes down with his Les Paul, busts his Les Paul, sits down on the cross legs, and starts playing all this classical stuff. And this guy's like really impressed, But then Randy gets goofy. He starts putting all the shapes in, all the wild shapes with his classical guitar. We were laughing our butts off, man. It was so funny.
It's interesting. I mean, for you at that time, you
we were
really had a deep connection because if you were drinking a lot, you never used to drink that much.
But I remember when his mother came to England. We were living in this apartment, and this is very funny. I was grossly overweight. She'd never seen me before. And I was unconscious on the couch in this apartment that we'd rented in London, in Randu. There's all these cans of empty beer and that lying on the floor, and best cigarette butts and whatnot. And I wake up and I can hear somebody sweeping the apartment up, and I go, "What the hell's going on?" So he says, I didn't realise it. I said, "There was this woman cleaning it," and he goes, "It's my mum." I go, "Hey, it's my mum. Oh, I'm sorry." So we go to rehearsal, and I'm sitting in the middle, and Mrs. Rhoads is sitting to my left, and Randy's sitting to my right. So his mum has not spoke to me, because I just come around on the couch, and she goes to Randy. I'm in the middle of him. She goes, "So Randy, when do I get to meet Ozzy?" And he goes, "Ma, you're sitting next to him." And she goes, "I thought he was a roadie." He went, "Oh my God."
So you each thought each other somewhere.
Mm.
Do you ever? I mean, did she remember that story?
I don't know whether she does. She might.
All these years, you haven't mentioned that one to her. It's like the first time you hear that.
But I do miss you, and every time I play those songs, for instance, just the other night we were doing, we were playing some of the songs down in the studio, and he was. Whenever I listen to an old record of mine, it takes me back to that time. And it's a kind of the records after that, up until No More Tears, were No More Tears was a record that I had to do, but it took me a couple of albums to get to let go of the Randy part.
So really, that was the first time that you felt finally.
Oh yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah. I mean,
So from 1983, 82, even on through to 1991, still music.
it takes a long time for you to. It shakes you like nothing on earth, but you go on. And when Randy died, that's what I remember saying to Sharon, "It's over." She said, "No, it is not." I says, "But you're joking. Everything that I seem to touch dies or falls to pieces, you know." And she says, we got guys who come and stand in for a while, and we just and the next thing I remember was doing Madison Square Garden with this guy that I don't even remember the gig. I don't remember, but apparently it was all right. But you kind of go on automatic pilot for a while, you know. And I can't remember Sharon through that pilot period. I can't remember what she was doing, whether she was handling or what. But I just span off on an alcoholic drug binge for a long while.
So as we sit now, we're tired of. As you sit now, just a brief encapsulation right here, right now, how you would like people to remember him from you, and how you.
Well, Randy Rhoads will never die in my heart, and as long as I have the breath of lungs in my body, I will keep his name going. I will, because as much as Ozzy came from Sabbath, Ozzy came from Randy Rhoads as well, and Randy Rhoads came from Ozzy, and it's one of the brief passions that what one gets from one. It's like every now and then you look up in the sky and you see a shooting star, and yet the sky is full of stars. Randy Rhoads is one of those shooting stars.